The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal fields of Valari Prime. Jiwan Park wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched the Cathani farmers tend to their crops. The tall, graceful beings moved through the rows of glowing plants with practiced ease. Their crystalline skin caught the light, creating small rainbows that danced across the purple soil. Jiwan had been on this world for 10 years now. He came here as a young agricultural specialist from Earth, excited to help an alien species develop better farming methods. The Cathani were peaceful people who valued knowledge and growth above all else. They had welcomed him with open arms and treated him like family. Teacher Jiwan, called Velani, one of the younger Cathani. Her voice had a musical quality that all her people shared. The Earth sensors show the mineral levels are perfect now. The crops will grow twice as fast. Jiwan smiled and nodded. Good work, Velani. Your people learn quickly. He looked across the vast fields that stretched to the horizon. 10 years ago, this had been barren wasteland. Now it fed the entire colony of 50,000 Cathani. The peace was shattered by a sound that made everyone freeze. It was a deep humming that seemed to come from the sky itself. Jiwan looked up and saw massive shadows blocking out the sun. Ships, hundreds of them. Each one was the size of a city block. Black as space and bristling with weapons. What are those? Velani whispered, her crystalline features showing fear for the first time Jiwan had ever seen. Before he could answer, the ships began to descend. They landed in the fields, crushing the crops beneath their weight. The humming grew louder and then stopped completely. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Hatches opened on the sides of the ships. What came out made Jiwan's blood run cold. They were massive creatures, easily 8 feet tall, with bodies covered in natural armor that looked like black chitin. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their heads were insectoid, with multiple eyes that glowed red in the dim light. The Vextar. Jiwan had heard stories about them from other human colonies. They were conquerors who swept across the galaxy, taking what they wanted and enslaving anyone who got in their way. But the Cathani were so far from the main trade routes. How had the Vextar found them? Run, Jiwan whispered to Velani. Get to the village and warn Elder Sylvaneth. The young Cathani needed no further encouragement. She turned and ran as fast as her long legs could carry her. Jiwan watched her go, then looked back at the ships. More Vextar were emerging, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. They moved with purpose, spreading out across the fields like a dark tide. Jiwan ran toward the village, his heart pounding. Behind him, he could hear the Vextar shouting in their harsh language. Energy blasts lit up the air, burning through the crops he and the Cathani had worked so hard to grow. The village was in chaos when he arrived. Cathani families were running in all directions, their musical voices raised in panic. Elder Sylvaneth stood in the center of the main square, trying to calm his people. The old Cathani's crystalline skin had lost its usual glow, now appearing dull with fear. Elder, Jiwan called out as he reached the square. We need to evacuate. The Vextar are here. Sylvaneth turned to him with sad eyes. Teacher Jiwan, there is nowhere to run. Our ships are for farming and transport, not war. We have no weapons, no soldiers. We are a peaceful people. Then we need to call for help, Jiwan said. The Galactic Communication Array. We can send a distress signal. Who would answer? Sylvaneth asked. The Confederation Council? They only care about rich worlds with resources to trade. The merchant guilds, they work with the Vextar when it suits them. The sound of energy weapons grew closer. Through the crystal buildings, Jiwan could see the first Vextar warriors entering the village. They moved slowly, deliberately, like predators who knew their prey had nowhere to go. We have to try, Jiwan insisted. Someone out there might care. Someone might help. Sylvaneth nodded slowly. The communication center is at the north edge of the village. But Jiwan, you must understand. If we send this message, it will tell the galaxy where we are. It might bring more enemies instead of friends. Then we're dead anyway, Jiwan said. At least this way we have a chance. They made their way through the panicking crowds toward the communication center. The building was made of the same living crystal as all Cathani structures, but this one pulsed with the energy of the massive transmitter inside. The first Vextar they encountered was standing over a fallen Cathani family. The creature looked up as they approached, its multiple eyes focusing on them. It said something in its harsh language and raised its weapon. Jiwan didn't think. He grabbed a piece of broken crystal from the ground and threw it at the creature's head. The Vextar stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt. It gave Sylvaneth enough time to reach the communication center's entrance. "Inside, quickly," the elder called. They rushed into the building as energy blasts scorched the wall behind them. The communication array was a beautiful piece of Kethani technology, all flowing curves and pulsing lights. Sylvaneth's hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. "I'm opening all channels," he said. "This message will reach every world in this sector of the galaxy." Through the crystal walls, they could see more Vextar surrounding the building. Some were setting up what looked like heavy weapons. Others were herding groups of Kethani toward the ships in the fields. "Hurry," Jiwan urged. Sylvaneth activated the transmitter. His voice, usually so calm and musical, now carried the weight of desperate hope. "This is Elder Sylvaneth of the Kethani colony on Valari Prime. We are under attack by the Vextar Dominion. Our people are peaceful. We have no military, no weapons. They are taking our children. They are burning our fields. Anyone, please help us. We have done no harm to anyone. We seek only to live in peace and grow our crops. But they are destroying everything we have built." The message repeated automatically as the transmitter sent it out through quantum space to every receiver in range. Jiwon watched the status lights, seeing the signal reach world after world. Most showed no response. A few sent back automated acknowledgments, but nothing more. "There," Jiwon said, moving to another console. "Let me add something." His fingers moved over the controls, adding Earth's coordinates to the message. It was a risk. Humans tried to keep their location secret from most of the galaxy, but if there was any chance that his own people might help. The building shook as something heavy struck the wall. Through the crystal, they could see Vextar soldiers setting up a large cannon. They had maybe minutes before the building was destroyed. "The message is sent," Sylvaneth said quietly. "Now we can only hope someone heard us." The cannon fired. The wall exploded inward, showering them with crystal fragments. Vextar soldiers poured through the breach, their weapons trained on the two figures huddled by the transmitter. The lead Vextar spoke in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "You will come with us. You will work. Resistance brings pain." As they were dragged from the ruined communication center, G1 looked back at the transmitter. Its lights were still pulsing, still sending their desperate message out into the void. Somewhere in space, quantum signals carried their plea across the galaxy. Most civilizations that received it would file it away and forget about it. The Kethani had nothing to offer, no resources worth the risk of fighting the Vextar. But on a small blue world in the outer rim, the message was received by different ears. Ears that belonged to a species that had learned something most of the galaxy had forgotten. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible. The call echoed through the stars, carrying with it the hope of a dying world. 3 months after the message from Valari Prime reached Earth, Fleet Admiral Hyunwoo Kim stood in the command center of the TDC ship Indomitable. The massive warship floated in orbit around Luna, its dark hull bristling with weapons and armor that would have terrified most alien species. To human eyes, it looked exactly like what it was, a tool built for war. The holographic display showed star charts of the Valari sector with red markers indicating known Vextar positions. Admiral Kim studied the data with cold eyes. He was a man in his 50s, with gray hair and scars on his hands from his early days as a Marine. Like most humans who had reached high rank in the military, he had seen real combat. "Show me the message again," he said to his communications officer. Lieutenant Yuna Kang pressed a control, and Elder Sylvaneth's voice filled the command center. Even after 3 months, the desperate hope in the alien's words made everyone in the room feel uncomfortable. The Kethani had been calling for help and no one had answered. "Intelligence reports, Commander Han," Admiral Kim said. Commander Soo-Young Han stepped forward. She was younger than the Admiral, but her eyes held the same hard look that came from years of dealing with the darker side of galactic politics. "Sir, the Vextar Dominion has taken 17 systems in the past year. They follow the same pattern every time. They arrive with overwhelming force, break the local government, and enslave the population. Most worlds surrender without fighting. What makes them so effective?" asked Dr. Minji Lee. The fleet's chief scientist was studying reports on her tablet, her face showing disgust at what she was reading. "They've perfected psychological warfare," Commander Han explained. "They don't just conquer worlds, they break them mentally. They make examples of those who resist. They separate families. They destroy anything the local population values. Most species give up hope before the first battle is even fought. Captain Do-hyun Choi, commander of the assault carrier Retribution, slammed his fist on the table. Then why are we sitting here talking? There are innocent people suffering while we debate. Because we need to think about Earth's safety, Commander Han replied. If we attack the Vextar, they'll learn where we are. Humanity has stayed hidden for good reasons. We're not ready for a full galactic war. We're never going to be ready, Captain Choi shot back. There will always be another excuse to wait, another reason to stay hidden. Meanwhile, people die. Admiral Kim listened to the argument without speaking. This same debate had been going on for weeks in the Terran Defense Council. Earth had spent decades building up its military in secret, staying out of galactic politics. Most alien species didn't even know humans existed. It was safer that way. But safety had a cost. Dr. Lee, the Admiral said, tell me about human advantages in combat. The scientist looked up from her tablet. Sir, most alien species evolved on what they call garden worlds, planets with stable climates and few natural threats. They developed advanced technology to make their lives easier and safer. Humans evolved on what the galaxy calls a death world. Explain that for those who haven't read your reports. Admiral Kim said, Earth is a nightmare planet by galactic standards, Dr. Lee continued. Violent weather, dangerous animals, poisonous plants, deadly diseases. Most alien species couldn't survive a week on Earth without advanced technology, but humans lived there for millions of years with nothing but stone tools and fire. She brought up a holographic image of a human soldier next to several alien species. This shaped us in ways other species don't understand. We have faster reflexes, stronger bones, better healing, but more importantly, we think differently about danger and death. How so? Captain Choi asked. Most alien species avoid risk at all costs. Humans calculate risk and take it anyway if the goal is important enough. We call it courage. They call it insanity. Commander Han shook her head. That still doesn't change the strategic situation. If we reveal ourselves to help the Kithani, we put Earth at risk. Actually, Dr. Lee said quietly, it might be the opposite. The galaxy is watching what happens to the Kithani. If the Vextar can destroy a peaceful species without any consequences, they'll grow bolder. Eventually, they'll find Earth anyway. Admiral Kim stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, he could see other ships of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. 50 warships, each one built by a species that had learned to survive on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. They looked different from the elegant vessels other species built, more angular, more armored, designed by people who expected to get hurt. The Vextar think fear is the ultimate weapon, he said finally. They've built their entire empire on the idea that resistance is hopeless. But they've never met humans. He turned back to his officers. Dr. Lee is right. Hiding won't keep us safe forever. And Captain Choi is right too. There are innocent people dying while we debate. Commander Han, your concerns are valid, but sometimes you have to take risks to do what's right. Sir, are you ordering an attack? Commander Han asked. I'm ordering a rescue mission, Admiral Kim replied. We're going to Valari Prime, we're going to save those people. And we're going to show the Vextar that their reign of terror has limits. The command center fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. Humanity was about to reveal itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, by declaring war on the most feared military force in known space. Captain Choi grinned. When do we leave, sir? Immediately. Signal all ships to prepare for quantum jump, full combat readiness. As the crew hurried to carry out his orders, Admiral Kim remained at the viewport. He thought about Earth, that blue marble that had forged humanity in fire and blood and endless struggle. Other species saw it as a hell world. Humans called it home. The Vextar had built their empire by convincing everyone that resistance was hopeless. They were about to learn something that every human child knew from growing up on Earth. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is hurt someone weaker than yourself when a human is watching. Fleet. Communications came alive as 50 warships prepared for battle. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet was not the largest human force, but it was enough. It had to be enough. On distant Valari Prime, the Kithani continued to suffer under Vextar rule. They had sent their message into the void 3 months ago, hoping someone would hear their call for help. Most of the galaxy had ignored them. But their signal had reached Earth. And now Earth was coming. The Vextar Dominion was about to Discover what happened when Deathworlders decided that something was worth fighting for. They were about to learn that there were worse things in the galaxy than their weapons and their cruelty. They were about to meet humanity. The Vextar sensor operator on the orbital station around Valari Prime was having a boring day. Nothing ever happened in this backwater system. The Cathani slaves worked in the mines below. The tribute flowed to the Dominion, and the galaxy continued to fear Vextar power. Everything was as it should be. Then his screens lit up with warning signals. Contact! He chittered in alarm. Multiple ships entering the system. Vector. Unknown configuration. Overlord Krexthul stomped over to the sensor station. The massive Vextar commander was larger than most of his species, with battle scars covering his black chitin armor. He had conquered 12 worlds for the Dominion and never met resistance that lasted more than a few days. Show me, he growled. The sensor display revealed 50 ships moving in formation toward Valari Prime. But these were not like any ships the Vextar had seen before. They were angular and brutal-looking, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. No elegant curves or decorative elements. These ships looked like they were built for one purpose only: war. What species builds ships like that? Krexthul demanded. Unknown, Overlord. They are not in our databases. Configuration suggests aggressive design philosophy. The unknown fleet was moving fast, too fast for the usual diplomatic approaches that preceded surrender. Most species would have sent communication requests by now, asking for terms. These ships just kept coming. Send the standard intimidation message, Krexthul ordered. Tell them to identify themselves and prepare for inspection. The communication went out across all frequencies. The response came back immediately, and it was not what anyone expected. This is Admiral Hyunwoo Kim of the Terran Defense Coalition. You have enslaved peaceful beings and destroyed their world. We are here to correct this mistake. Surrender now or face the consequences. Krexthul stared at the communication panel. In all his years of conquest, no one had ever spoken to the Vextar like that. Species begged for mercy. They offered tribute. They negotiated surrender terms. They did not issue ultimatums. Terran? He said. What is Terran? Unknown species, Overlord. No records in Dominion databases. Send another message. Tell them we have 10,000 Cathani prisoners. If they do not withdraw immediately, we will execute them all. This threat had never failed to work. Even the most warlike species backed down when hostages were involved. The response came back within minutes. Admiral Kim to Vextar forces. You just made a very big mistake, that was all. No negotiation. No begging. Just a simple statement that somehow sounded more threatening than any battle cry. Captain Min Seok Bae watched the Vextar station through the view screen of his stealth frigate Shadow Runner. His ship was invisible to enemy sensors, allowing him to scout the system and gather intelligence. What he saw made his blood boil. The Cathani were being worked to death in massive strip mines that had torn ugly scars across their beautiful world. Their crystal cities were partially destroyed, with Vextar military installations built on top of the ruins. In the main compound, he could see groups of Cathani being herded around by armed guards. Sir? His sensor operator reported. I'm detecting a human life sign in the command compound. It's weak, but definitely human. Ji-won Park, Captain Bae said grimly. The agricultural specialist from the distress message. Through his scopes, he could see Vextar guards dragging prisoners toward execution platforms. The threat had not been empty. They really were going to start killing hostages. Signal the fleet, Captain Bae ordered. Tell Admiral Kim the Vextar are executing prisoners. Request permission to engage. The response was immediate. All ships, this is Admiral Kim. Execute attack plan Alpha. Save those people. The human fleet suddenly accelerated. What had looked like a cautious approach became a combat charge. The ships spread out in an attack formation that no alien species would recognize, because no alien species fought the way humans did. On the Vextar station, alarms began blaring. Overlord! The unknown ships are attacking. They're not slowing down. Krexthul could not believe what he was seeing. The alien ships were diving straight toward the planet, ignoring the orbital defenses entirely. This was suicide. No species attacked fortified positions without first destroying the defenders' ability to fight back. All batteries, open fire, he commanded. Energy beams lanced out from the station and the patrol ships. Several hits connected with the attacking vessels. Krexthul expected to see the alien fleet break apart or retreat. Instead, the damaged ships kept coming. One of them was actually accelerating toward his station with its hull on fire. "Overlord, the damaged ship is on a collision course. Evasive maneuvers." But it was too late. The human destroyer, fearless, with half its systems dead and its crew fighting fires throughout the ship, slammed into the Vextar station at full speed. The explosion lit up space for hundreds of kilometers. On the planet's surface, Vextar ground forces prepared to execute more prisoners. Then small ships began dropping from the sky like meteors. These were human drop pods designed to carry soldiers directly into combat zones. Most species considered such direct assaults insane. The casualty rates were enormous. But humans had long ago decided that some objectives were worth any cost. Lieutenant Yuna Kang pulled her damaged fighter out of a screaming dive just meters above the ground. Her squadron had been ordered to provide cover for the rescue operation, but half her pilots were already dead or missing. Any sane species would have withdrawn to regroup. Instead, she led her remaining fighters in another attack run against the Vextar positions. The enemy had superior numbers and better defensive positions. By all military logic, this attack should fail, but military logic did not account for human psychology. The Vextar fought to win. Humans fought like their lives meant nothing if they could not save the innocent. "Razor Squadron, follow me in," Yuna called over the radio. "We're going to clear a path for the ground teams even if it kills us." Her fighter dove toward a Vextar gun position, energy beams tracking her movement. She did not try to avoid them. Instead, she flew straight through the defensive fire, accepting hits that would have destroyed most ships. Her fighter was built by humans on a world where everything tried to kill you. It kept flying. In the Vextar command compound, Overlord Krexthal watched his forces being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like madmen. These Terrans absorbed casualties that would have broken any other species and kept attacking. They seemed to have no concept of acceptable losses. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "our forces are requesting permission to retreat. The enemy is..." "They fight without regard for their own survival." Krexthal looked at the tactical display. Half his fleet was gone. Ground positions were falling one by one, and still the humans kept coming, pressing their attack with a ferocity that defied understanding. For the first time in his military career, the Overlord felt something he had never experienced before: fear. These creatures from an unknown world had brought something to the battlefield that the Vextar could not counter. They had brought the fury of a species that had learned, on the deadliest world in the galaxy, that sometimes you had to fight even when victory seemed impossible. Colonel Taehyung Park felt the ground shake as his drop pod slammed into the surface of Valari Prime. Around him, 50 more pods crashed down like meteors, carrying the first wave of human ground forces into the heart of Vextar territory. The impact would have killed most alien species. Humans just called it Tuesday. He kicked open the pod door and stepped onto alien soil for the first time. The air was thin and filled with toxic fumes from the strip mines. Perfect. The environmental suits other species needed would slow them down. Humans had grown up breathing poison on Earth and learned to fight through pain. "Alpha Company, sound off," he called into his radio. One by one, his soldiers reported in. 80% operational, better than expected for a hot drop into enemy territory. The 20% who did not answer were either dead or too badly hurt to fight. In human military doctrine, this was acceptable losses. "Sir," reported Sergeant Yunji. "Oh, enemy forces moving to surround the landing zone. Looks like 3 companies of Vextar infantry plus armor support." Colonel Park smiled grimly. The Vextar were doing exactly what he hoped they would do, concentrating their forces to crush the human landing. It was smart tactics against any normal enemy, but humans were not normal. Perfect. Let them come to us. "Bravo Company, move to the radiation zone by the mining complex. Charlie Company, take position in the toxic waste area. Alpha Company holds here." His officers looked at him with concern. "Sir, those areas are lethal." "Our suits can only protect us for limited time." "The Vextar suits can't protect them at all," Colonel Park replied. "We're going to use this planet's own deadliness against them." 3 kilometers away, Vextar Ground Commander Thekeval studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The human forces had landed in the most dangerous areas of the planet. Some were actually positioned in zones so poisonous that his own troops could not enter without dying within minutes. "Sir, should we wait for the humans to move to safer ground before we attack?" asked his second-in-command. "No," Thekeval growled. "We attack now, before they can establish proper defenses." The first Vextar assault moved across the scarred landscape toward the human positions. The aliens were confident in their superior numbers and heavier weapons. They had crushed every resistance they had ever faced. They had never fought humans before. The battle started when Sergeant Yoonji Oh's squad opened fire from positions inside a radioactive crater. The Vextar return fire was immediate and accurate, but the humans did not retreat. Instead, they advanced, using the deadly environment as cover. "Sir, the humans are moving deeper into the radiation zone," a Vextar officer reported in panic. "Our sensors show lethal levels of contamination." "Impossible," Tekval replied. "No species can survive that level of exposure." But the humans were not just surviving, they were fighting. Yoonji led her squad through areas that would cook most aliens in their own armor. The humans' environmental suits were simpler than Vextar equipment, but they were built by people who understood that sometimes you had to go where your enemy could not follow. Captain Ji-hoon Lee was having problems of his own aboard the marine assault ship Valkyrie. His vessel had taken heavy damage during the orbital battle, but it was still functional. More importantly, his sensors had located the Cathani prison camps. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's weak, but it's definitely human." The voice that came through the static was barely recognizable. Ji-won Park had been a prisoner of the Vextar for 3 months. He was thin, battered, and exhausted, but he was alive and his mind was still sharp. "This is Ji-won Park. If any humans are receiving this, I'm in the main prison compound. There are 8,000 Cathani here. The Vextar are planning to execute them all rather than let you rescue them." Captain Lee felt his blood turn cold. The entire reason for this mission was to save the Cathani. If the Vextar killed their prisoners, the human attack would be for nothing. "Mr. Park, this is Captain Lee of the Terran Marines. Can you help us get inside the compound?" "The main gates are too heavily defended," Ji-won's weak voice replied. "But there's a waste disposal tunnel that leads under the compound. It's filled with toxic sludge from the mines. The Vextar think it's impassable." Captain Lee grinned. The Vextar were learning that their idea of impassable and the human idea of impassable were very different things. "We're on our way. Mr. Park, hold tight." 20 minutes later, Captain Lee led 2 squads of Marines through the tunnel Ji-won had described. The toxic waste burned through their equipment and filled the air with deadly fumes. Behind them, they could hear Vextar forces trying to follow but being forced back by the poisonous environment. They emerged inside the prison compound to find chaos. Vextar guards were herding Cathani prisoners toward execution platforms, while others prepared defensive positions. The aliens had expected humans to attack through the main gates like civilized species. They had not expected them to crawl through a sewer. "Sir?" Sergeant Yoonji Oh's voice crackled over the radio from her position in the radiation zone. "We've broken through the enemy lines. Moving to support the prison rescue." "Negative, Sergeant," Colonel Park replied. "Hold your position and keep the enemy busy. Captain Lee's team will handle the rescue." The battle for the prison compound was swift and brutal. The Vextar guards were skilled fighters, but they were not prepared for human tactics. Marines advanced through areas too dangerous for aliens to defend. They took casualties that would have stopped other species and kept fighting. Ji-won Park watched from his cell as human soldiers moved through the compound like ghosts. They appeared where the enemy least expected them, struck hard and vanished before counterattacks could organize. It was like watching Earth's apex predators hunt. One of the Marines reached his cell, a young woman with sergeant's stripes and eyes that had seen too much combat. "Mr. Park? I'm Sergeant Oh. We're here to get you out." "The Cathani first," Ji-won said weakly. "Save them first." "We're saving everyone," Sergeant Oh replied, cutting through the cell's electronic lock with a plasma torch. That's what humans do. As the rescue operation continued, Overlord Krextel received reports that made no sense. His ground forces were being defeated by an enemy that fought in conditions no sane species would enter. His orbital defenses were in ruins. His prison compound was under attack by soldiers who seemed to appear from thin air. "Sir," his aide reported, "our forces are requesting permission to retreat. The enemy, they don't seem to understand that some objectives are not worth the cost." "What do you mean?" Krextel demanded. "They're willing to die to save people they've never met. They take casualties to rescue prisoners who mean nothing to their empire. They fight in poisonous environments to deny us defensive positions. It's not rational behavior." Krexthul stared at the tactical display showing his forces in full retreat. For the first time in Vexitar history, an invasion was failing not because of superior technology or better tactics, but because the enemy refused to accept that some costs were too high to pay. The humans were teaching the galaxy a lesson the Vextar had never learned. Sometimes the most important victories were the ones where you saved someone else, even if it meant sacrificing yourself. The Vextar fleet fled from Valari Prime like a dark cloud being blown away by the wind. Admiral Hyunwoo Kim watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as the enemy ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind their ground forces and most of their equipment. In 300 years of conquest, the Vextar Dominion had never retreated from a battle. "Sir," reported Commander Su Young-han, "we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining Vextar ground forces. They're laying down their weapons." Admiral Kim nodded but kept his eyes on the tactical display. "Captain Choi, take the retribution and pursue the fleeing ships. Don't let them regroup." "Sir, shouldn't we secure the planet first?" Captain Choi asked. "The planet is secure. Those Vextar ships are going to report back to their superiors. I want them to be very clear about what happened here." Captain Choi's grin was visible even over the communication channel. "Understood, sir. We'll make sure they remember this lesson." On the planet's surface, Jiwan Park stood in the ruins of the prison compound and watched human medics tend to the rescued Kethani. The tall crystalline beings were weak from months of forced labor, but they were alive. Elder Sylvaneth approached him slowly, his skin flickering with the colors that indicated deep emotion among his people. "Teacher Jiwon," the elder said in his musical voice, "your people came. They heard our call. They did more than that," Jiwon replied, looking around at the human soldiers who were working to clear the compound. "They risked everything to save people they had never met." Sergeant Yoon-ji-oh was directing the medical evacuation when she overheard their conversation. She walked over, her armor still scorched from the battle in the radiation zone. "Mr. Park, Elder Sylvaneth," she said, nodding respectfully. "I'm sorry we couldn't get here sooner." Elder Sylvaneth stared at her in amazement. "Child of Earth, you apologize to us? You crossed the galaxy to save strangers. You fought in poison and radiation. Your people died to free ours. There is nothing to forgive." Sergeant O looked uncomfortable with the praise. "We just did what anyone should do." "You asked for help." "No," Sylvaneth said softly. "We asked for help from many worlds. Only yours answered." 3 days later, news of the human victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The quantum communication networks buzzed with reports that seemed impossible to believe. The Vextar Dominion, the most feared military force in known space, had been defeated by a species no one had ever heard of, Dr. Minji. Lee was in her laboratory aboard the Indomitable when she received a priority message from Earth. She opened it to find a list of worlds that wanted to establish diplomatic contact with humanity. The list was very long. "Admiral," she called over the intercom, "you need to see this." Admiral Kim arrived at her lab to find displays showing communication requests from dozens of species. The Solari Confederation, known for their advanced technology. The Hegemony of Worlds, a loose alliance of trading systems. Even the secretive void dancers who rarely spoke to anyone. "What do they want?" Admiral Kim asked. "Alliance, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. Everyone wants to be friends with the species that beat the Vextar." "And what about the Kethani?" Dr. Lee smiled. "Elder Sylvaneth wants to know if we can help them rebuild their world. But he also asked if some of his people could visit Earth. He says they want to learn from the world that creates people like us." Admiral Kim considered this. Earth had remained hidden for so long that the idea of alien visitors seemed strange. But maybe it was time for humanity to take its place in the galactic community. Tell him yes, but warn him that Earth is a dangerous place. "I think he knows that, sir. I think that's exactly why he wants to visit." Captain Hanasio watched the construction crews working to repair the crystal cities of Valari Prime. Her ship, the Guardian, was one of 5 human vessels that had remained in the system to help with reconstruction. The rest of the fleet had returned to Earth or gone hunting for other Vextar strongholds. The Kethani were remarkable people, she had learned. They could grow food in conditions that would kill most plants. They could sing in harmonies that made even hardened soldiers weep, and they were learning to defend themselves. Captain, called Lieutenant Yuna Kang, who had survived the air battle and was now helping to train Kethani pilots. "You should see this." Captain Co followed her to the landing field, where a group of young Cathani were learning to fly defensive fighters. The ships were simple by human standards, but they were built with Cathani precision and Earth-inspired durability. They're natural pilots, Lieutenant Kang reported. Fast reflexes, excellent spatial awareness. With proper training, they could defend their own system. As if to prove her point, one of the Cathani trainees executed a perfect combat turn that would have impressed any human instructor. The pilot's crystalline features showed determination that would have been impossible 3 months ago. The Vextar broke their spirits, Captain Co observed. But spirits can heal. More than that, Lieutenant Kang said. They're not just healing. They're learning. Watch. The Cathani pilots were practicing combat formations, but they were adding their own improvements. They used their natural ability to communicate through harmonic frequencies to coordinate attacks with a precision no other species could match. They're not becoming human, Captain Co realized. They're becoming themselves, but stronger. Far across the galaxy, the news of Valari Prime reached a small mining station, where another peaceful species was facing Vextar demands for tribute. The station chief, a gentle being called Keeper Yolthara, read the reports with growing hope. She activated the emergency transmitter and sent out a message that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. This is Keeper Yolthara of Mining Station 7. We are under threat from the Vextar Dominion. We request assistance from the Terran Defense Coalition and any allied forces. The response came back within hours. Not just from Earth, but from a dozen other worlds. The Solari offered advanced shield technology. The hegemony promised supply ships. The Cathani themselves volunteered to send aid. But it was the human response that made Yolthara feel truly safe. This is Admiral Kim of the Terran Fleet. We are on our way. Hold your position. Help is coming. The age of Vexitar dominance was ending. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for generations were finding their courage. They had seen that the mighty could fall, that bullies could be stopped, that someone would answer when they called for help. Jiwan Park stood in the reconstructed fields of Valari Prime, watching Cathani farmers plant new crops in soil that had been poisoned by strip mining. The plants were different now, hardier, adapted to grow in the damaged earth. Like their growers, they had learned to survive in a harsher world. Elder Sylvaneth approached him, carrying a small crystal that pulsed with inner light. This is for you, Teacher Jiwan, the elder said, and for your people. It is a memory crystal. It contains the story of what humans did for us, so that future generations will remember that when we called into the darkness, Earth's children brought the light. Jiwan accepted the crystal and felt its warmth against his palm. Around them, the sounds of construction and new life filled the air. In the distance, human and Cathani children played together, learning each other's languages and games. The call that had echoed through the stars had been answered. And in answering it, humanity had not just saved one world, they had shown the galaxy that there was another way to live. A way where the strong protected the weak, where help came to those who needed it, and where no one had to face the darkness alone. The echo would continue, carried now by many voices spreading hope across the stars.